Okay, it's Luxury Fred, and if you've been watching my other videos from this week, you know that I'm on kind of a luxury getaway up here to Santa Barbara. I've been visiting and staying at the two Kimpton hotel properties. In case you didn't know, Kimpton is a cool luxury boutique hotel brand that's now owned by IHG. And of course, up here in Santa Barbara, wine is very popular.
Very.
So I'm here with Chase Carhartt, who's the winemaker?
Winemaker, owner, operator, winemaker.
All of the above of Carhartt Vineyard, which is about an hour from here?
We're actually only about 30 minutes.
30 minutes from here in Santa Ynez. And we've, this evening we had a chance to taste a few of Chase's different wines.
Just a few.
So I thought it would be good to ask him a couple questions about the winery and about his wines and about kind of the Santa Ynez wine scene.
Absolutely.
So the first thing that was interesting is your name.
Yep.
And people like me are very familiar with it as the best kind of work clothes and, you know, overalls and protective clothing and things like that. This is Carhartt. So it turns out it is the same family.
It is the same
company.
Family. Yep. It's
or not the same company.
Yeah, that's a very important detail,
okay.
Fred. So yeah, basically my family, my great-great-grandfather, Hamilton, started Carhartt Clothing in 1889 out of Detroit, Michigan. So, and that's actually where the company is still headquartered today.
Right.
So that's a really important factor. It's always stayed there. My great-grandfather, his son, actually came out to California, so I'm fifth generation here on the West Coast.
Wow.
And now, and then basically past Pasadena, my grandfather moved up to San Ynez Valley, and now I'm third generation up there, and growing grapes and farming and making wine, third generation on our ranch.
And the farming was the great-grandfather or the grandfather?
Yeah, my grandfather started the farming operation a little bit. My dad definitely grew the farming operation. I mean, he was, raising animals. Initially, when my grandfather bought the property up there in San Ynez, it was a 2,500 acre dairy and swine operation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was a pretty big deal. My grandfather sort of phased that out. And then my father was farming hay all over the San Ynez Valley and a bunch of different row crops. And then my parents, after we married my mom, my parents planted the vineyard in 1996. We got into the wine game.
And the planting of the vineyard was more of a hobby or just a fun thing, or not as a business or as a business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, my dad, I would absolutely call him a green thumb,
right? To
put it in layman's terms. He grew up farming, and that's the whole deal. But yeah, they planted the vineyard sort of as a retirement opportunity, you could say. They planted 10 acres of grapes. This is very important for everybody watching here that wants to grow, that wants to make wine and plant a vineyard. It's very romantic, and not to burst the bubble on everybody, but it takes a lot of money to make even a little bit of money in the wine industry, right? So 10 acres of grapes is not actually enough acreage. It doesn't produce enough yield to offset the costs.
Right.
So what we're dealing with is to even make any money just in farming alone, you've got to have probably more like 50, 60, 100 acres to actually start making money because of all the farming costs that are incurred.
And farming grapes you're talking about?
Farming grapes. Farming grapes. Okay. Specifically grapes. Especially because nowadays, just to plant even an acre of grapes is anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000 an acre. Just to plant.
Right.
But then, so they planted that 10 acres of grapes, and then to offset costs, coupled with the whole romance of the whole thing, they made a barrel of Merlot and a barrel of Syrah in 1998, our first vintage, and then it just followed suit from there.
And you're unique in that the winery only sells to consumers. It's not in stores, pretty much. It's not in restaurants. You have to buy either being a member of the wine club or buying online or actually going to your tasting room.
Yeah.
And you have a famous tasting room in Los Olivos.
Correct.
Olivos?
Good pronunciation.
Okay,
Yeah.
which
Los
means
Olivos, yeah.
the olives.
There you go.
And that's where all the tasting rooms are for all the wineries in that general region.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing places I've ever been in the world. We in about 2 blocks in a crossed pattern, right? With a flagpole in the middle.
Right.
Center of town. There's about 50 tasting rooms.
Wow.
That's almost every single building is a tasting room. It's one of the most intense meccas for tastings that I've ever been to in my life, anywhere in any country.
How far is that from Santa Barbara, from where we are?
Yeah, so
now?
if you take Highway 154 cruising, you could be there in probably about less than 45 minutes.
Okay.
And yeah, we have an iconic tasting room there. We call it the Carhartt Cabin. It's right in the middle of downtown Los Olivos. And we've been there for we just moved locations about 4 weeks ago.
Right.
But we've been in Los Olivos for almost 15 years.
Wow.
And had a tasting room. And to just, add to what you were saying earlier, we are 100% direct to consumer. 0 restaurants, 0 wine bars,
Right.
no markets, nothing. Just straight between, the tasting room, online, e-commerce,
By
on our
choice.
website,
By
and wine
choice.
club, and that is by choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And as Chase was saying before when he was talking to the group, it's because you want the opportunity to engage with the consumer or someone that works for you, someone that's knowledgeable about the wine. That's who you want to engage with the consumer,
Yeah.
not have it served by a waiter at a restaurant that doesn't know anything about it, or sold by a wine
Yeah.
bar that sells 100 other things and isn't real familiar with what makes your stuff special.
Yeah, I think the most important part of this conversation is that the human connection, very important, right? Human connection to wine. And the way that it's almost like, your first impression, right? First
Right.
impression is everything.
Right.
And often this first impression with a brand or with a wine is so important to me that I don't really want anybody else to do that
Right.
except for me, my company, and the people that work for
Right.
me. And that work with me and my family.
Right.
It is so important to us that we just don't allow that to happen with
Right.
anybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's taste some wine.
Let's taste some wine.
Okay. So do you grow specific grapes? Do you specialize in certain varieties of wine?
I do
and
specialize.
I love wine and I drink wine. I'm not an expert. I don't know a lot of details and things like that. So if I don't sound like an expert, it's because I'm not an expert.
Hey, that's all right.
I just wanted to have that disclaimer
that's
there.
important, but
Yes.
expert is just like wine. It's very subjective, right? So I've spent my entire life revolving around wine, and I
Right.
still would not consider myself an expert, and nor should most people.
Okay.
Because we know that this is something we're continuously learning from.
Right.
Very important. You talked about growing grapes. This is actually something we grow. Would be called, in the terminology of wine, when you see the word estate grown, that means it comes from the property. That means the estate, the domain, the company is growing those grapes and making wine from them.
And what Chase means is that if he wanted to, you could buy grapes that someone else grew somewhere else.
And I do.
And bottle them. And not that there's something wrong with that, but that's what estate wine means, that the grapes are grown on your property by you.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this is one example. This is a unique example, I would say. We have about a 3-acre parcel of a variety called Sangiovese. Not everybody knows Sangiovese, but most people know Chianti.
Right.
We think about Chianti, we think about movie Hannibal, probably. Right. That's what everybody thinks about. So Chianti is a region in Italy and Tuscany, and that's actually the birthplace of Sangiovese, the grape.
Right.
When you go to Italy, it's all about regions.
Right.
That's the name on the wine label. When we talk about the United States and what we do here in the New World, so to speak,
Right.
usually we put a whimsical name or a name of the grape on
see.
the label.
Right.
And that's why we have Sangiovese here. So Sangiovese and Chianti, more or less the same thing. A little different, but more or less the same grape, grown in 2 different places.
Okay.
So I grow about 3 acres of Sangio, and this is actually one of my favorite wines. And I think the reason is its versatility.
Right.
Versatility is so important. When you go to somebody's house, being a non-expert, you're like, what do I bring? What is a wine that I bring to make people enjoy it or look good or pair it with specific foods or whatever? So versatility is really important. Something that has acidity, but something that also has the body to support all different types of foods.
Right.
That's Sangio. That's the middle ground.
Meaning no matter what someone is serving, they're going to be happy that you brought
Pretty
it.
much.
Right.
It's bigger than Pinot Noir, but it's not as big as something like Cabernet Sauvignon.
Right.
So you're kind of, you can either have it without food, you can have it with food. This is pizza, pasta, Italian,
Right.
meat, bolognese, those types of things. You want spice, throw red pepper flakes in here. I mean, it's great. It handles spice well. It's got an earthy component, but it's also got nice fruit.
Right.
It's an extremely versatile wine. That's the whole idea with food and wine pairing.
What does a bottle like that cost?
This bottle retails for, I believe, $42.
And you were saying before that anything over $50 is related to the property that it's grown on. It's not related to the production costs of the actual wine. Is there a minimum that you need to pay? Any wine under $15 is most likely not going to be very good? Or, you know?
Yeah, it's a good question, and a question that is so important in today's wine world.
Because my grocery store, which is an upscale fancy grocery store, Gelson's,
Yeah.
has an under $10
Yeah.
end cap. You know,
the margin that, for instance, a winery gets from a bottle of wine that somehow ends up on a shelf for less than $10 is relative to the country that they make wine in.
right,
For us to see a bottle of wine that's under $10 here, you have to. It's all scale.
Right.
So it's got to be made on such a massive scale that it makes actual sense.
right. That
And
you
therefore
only
there's
need to
probably-
make $1.
There's
right,
probably less of that. It's like bread.
right,
You bake bread, you get up at 4, 5 a.m. in the morning to bake bread, and you sell it for X amount, whereas you buy Sara Lee on the shelf, there's probably a little bit more preservatives in there.
Right.
It's sold for less expensive because they mass produce it.
Right, right.
It's the same thing with wine in that
Right.
respect. You know, I will tell you that there are beautiful wines in this world that you can buy for $15.
right,
Beautiful wines. So nobody should ever say that, you know, price necessarily dictates
Right.
quality, because I've had wines that are very expensive
right,
that really are nothing to shout about just because they use heavy glass,
right,
a big fancy flowery label, you know, and that stuff's still important, and the whole aesthetic of
Right, right.
standpoint of wine is important. I believe that, but I just want to make sure that the consumer understands that it's all about what you like. If
Right.
you spend $10 on a bottle of wine and it's good,
Right.
and it worked, and it made you happy at dinner, and people are happy,
right.
you
Buy
have
it
a great
again.
evening,
Yeah,
buy cases of that wine.
right, right,
Love it and squeeze everything you can out of that wine until you don't like it anymore.
Right, right.
Because it makes sense and you're working on a budget.
right,
What I will encourage people to do is to go and visit tasting rooms, visit wineries, and learn, especially in the Central Coast where you can meet winemakers, is that you can learn the little details that make a bottle of wine, that
Right.
make a vintage. What is all that about? It's all cool stuff. From a point of
Right.
view that's a little less on their high horse.
Right.
It makes sense. It's fun.
Right.
It's time encapsulated. It's art in a bottle, right?
right,
And once you learn about those types of things, food pairings, you know, it makes sense as to why to pay a little bit more of a premium
Right.
for those types of things. And there is a reason certain wines cost what they do.
Right.
When we talk about the labor that goes into it and the production, that's where you got that $50 figure, which, you know, it's not exactly 50 something.
Right,
It costs
right.
a little bit more. But the bottom line is now we're going into the whole field of vineyards, you know, where the fruit's grown.
right,
Exactly what kind of oak was used or what kind of vessel, how long it was aged.
Right, right.
Those types of intricacies dictate the price point of a wine,
Right.
and it can fluctuate between 10 and thousands of dollars.
Right.
But again, I encourage people to learn for themselves
Right.
if they enjoy it. If it brings them happiness, learn the details, and then you'll understand why, you know, that middle ground
Right.
of $30 to $60 is such a great window.
Right.
And it makes sense.
right, right.
Yeah. And it supports people that are doing this for a
Right.
lifestyle.
Cool. Yeah. So what do we got?
So we got some Sangiovese.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Cheers.
Thank you. Now hold the glass on the stem, not up here like this.
So
if I might
the
ask.
proper way to hold it would be here on the stem.
Okay.
Okay. The reason being, temperature is really important
Right.
with wine. If it's really cold, then you might warm it up, but your palms are really warm.
Right.
So it's important to hold at the stem to not affect the temperature.
To not
unless
affect
you
the
want to
temperature.
affect the
Right.
temperature.
Right.
You know, one thing I see people doing a lot of times is getting it and they immediately feel like they have to swirl the hell out of the glass.
Right.
That's not entirely necessary. When someone pours you wine, volatile, there's aromatics that are
That's
released.
swirling it, yeah.
You can just go ahead and give it a smell right there. It
Right.
might need a little bit of time to open up, and therefore that's when you're sitting here giving a little bit of a swirl. You know, if you can't do this just
Right.
in the air, you can put it on a table and do this. That's fine too. Give it a little bit of time. You don't need to sit there and swirl it until your wrist hurts.
And what about using a decanter or using I have one of those aerating things that you put in the bottle.
Again, it is a little bit particular in terms of situation and what wine you're drinking.
I see.
But again, what I would encourage people to do is you don't need any fancy equipment.
Okay.
You don't need the Venturi, no offense to any of those companies, but you don't need it.
Right.
What I would encourage people to do is open a bottle of wine, pour a little bit into a glass, taste it,
Right.
smell it. Leave wine in the glass, let it sit there. Then smell it again, then taste it, then pour your wine into a, essentially almost like a water pitcher.
Right, right.
Serve at dinner. Let it aerate that way, taste it then, and then wait another 30
Right.
minutes. Do your own little bits of trials and try different things, and you'll understand.
Right. How
Some
the
wines-
taste changes.
Some wines
Yeah,
need
yeah.
a little bit more time to
Yeah.
aerate, and some don't.
My girl and I went to France, and a friend of ours lives in Provence, and we had some great wines with him that after just opening the bottle and tasting it and then having it sit for 10 or 15 minutes, drastically different.
Yeah.
Surprisingly different.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Better.
Yeah.
Surprisingly
Yeah,
better.
and it does. It changes. Everything changes. Food changes it. Get 5 or 6 cheeses at the market and taste the wine before, and then taste them with
Right.
cheese pairing.
Because that's still on your palate. Yeah.
That is the most intense food pairing you could do.
Okay.
And it will change things for you.
So what should we be tasting in this
Oh
now?
man, you're gonna find a nice marriage of earth, red fruit, a little bit of black pepper. But again, in terms of tannin or in terms of mouthfeel, medium body, relatively soft, nice acidity. Something that's going to go well with tomato sauce, something that's going to go well, like I said before, with like bolognese or something like that, or pizza. Friday night, my mom calls it a Friday night wine because it's like you throw some pizza together, make a homemade pizza, you're good. Done deal. This is a nice table wine, if you will.
And I agree. It's very good.
Cheers.
So I think that was a good overview and introduction with Chase and Carhartt Vineyard.
Yeah.
And hopefully in the next couple weeks, I'm going to make it up to the vineyard and be able to talk to Chase more and see more of the operation and see how they do everything. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Love to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.